My dad and mom quoted 1 Corinthians 10:31 to me hundreds of times. Johnny, whether you eat or whether you drink, whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. I knew that's my duty. And it did not have the effect that it had when I discovered in 1971, 68, 69, 71, that God does everything for His glory, and I am commanded to join Him in it. That was like dynamite in my soul. And it might be in yours if you can get over the stumbling block that God is so self-exalting and that Christ is so Christ-exalting and invites you in to their passion for their glory. The discomfort in this room with that idea shows how far you are from comprehending, some of you, how radical this is. You're uncomfortable with talking that way. And the Bible talks like that everywhere. God doing things for His glory. Christ doing things for His glory. Christ glorifying God. God glorifying Christ. This intra-Trinitarian conspiracy to magnify each other is everywhere in the Bible. But we live in such an absolutely man-centered world that those things make us creepy-crawly. So let me give you 5 quick reasons for why they have had such an effect upon me to provide booster behind Philippians 1:20 and 1:21. Why do you need to even go there, Piper? Why do you need to bring up that when Paul says, I want my life to count, to magnify Christ, you draw in the fact that this is God's design for him, and therefore God's God-centeredness and Christ-exalting passion are behind it. Why do you go there? And here are 5 reasons why I go there. Number 1, God's unswerving allegiance to His own glory shows how righteous He is and how trustworthy He is, and I wouldn't know it any other way. Righteousness from God is doing right. What is doing right for a God? He wrote the book. There's no law for God to obey. What does doing right mean for God? What is righteousness in God? And doing right for God means valuing what's valuable, esteeming what's infinitely worthy of esteem, treasuring what is infinitely worthy of being treasured. And what's that? Himself. And if He were to do anything other than value the infinitely valuable, God, treasure the infinitely worthy, God, esteem the infinitely esteem-worthy, God, He would be unrighteous, unreliable, untrustworthy, and an idolater to boot. And I don't want a God like that. That's one reason why it makes a huge difference in my life. I want a righteous God. I have to have a righteous God, a just God, a holy God, an infinitely wise, perceptive, knows what is truly valuable type God. Here's the second reason. God's unwavering allegiance to His own glory shows the immeasurable extent of God's happiness. You can't even begin to comprehend how happy God is until you know that He delights in the Son more than He delights in you. The Son of God is the radiance of His glory, the exact imprint of His nature, and He's had Him in His face forever. There has never been a time when God has not been infinitely happy in the fellowship that He has, beholding the array of His perfections in the beauty of His Son. God is like a Vesuvius of joy forever. You can't even get at that without God's passion for God. Third, God's unwavering allegiance to His own glory shows how easily we can be deceived thinking that we love God when in fact we love ourselves more than God. Oh, how deceived we can be. And one of the reasons people get really bent out of shape about this is because they really love themselves and use God. God is not their end. God is a means. You step on God to get to where you want to be. He's useful. Gets rid of my guilt feelings, gets me out of hell, gets my sins forgiven, and now I can have eternal, you name your idol. golf, sex, food, beach, surfing, sunshine. Thank you, God, very much. And you're willing to thank Him forever, as long as He doesn't have to be your God. He's just useful, just useful. This teaching that God is radically God-centered won't let that stand. It will always say, am I your supreme treasure? Or are you using me to get your supreme treasure? That's number 3. Number 4, maybe the most important for getting you over the hump. And I want you to get over the hump. I'm not eager to beat you up. I'm eager to get you over a hump here. And here's the biggest hump to get over and the way over it. The reason people don't like this teaching about the God-centeredness of God and how God-exalting God is and how radically Christ-exalting Christ is because it simply doesn't sound loving. Love seeks not its own. 1 Corinthians 13:5. You're telling us God seeks His own all the time. So He's not loving, so you're wrong. 40 texts, be damned. No. Here's the answer. This truth that God is constantly, unwaveringly, in all that He does, exalting His Son, magnifying His glory, is vastly more loving than if He devoted Himself to help you like what you see in the mirror. If God were to make Himself a means to your self-exaltation, He would be a global distraction from what would make you happy. You know what love is? It's not what the world says it is. The world says, somebody loves me if they make much of me. And that feels so good, it's hard not to believe. Somebody loves me if they make much of me. But in that relationship, you are the end. And He's the means. He makes much of me. That's not what love is in the Bible. In the Bible, love labors, sacrifices, and even dies to liberate you from your bondage to the mirror so that you can delight in God forever. You're selling your soul for a bowl of oatmeal when you want God to just meet your earthly needs and call that love. That's not love. Love is when God does that or not in ways that bring you free from your love affair with yourself and free you to enjoy making much of Him forever. You were made to know and love God. You know this is true. You stand by the seacoast. You stand by the edge of the Grand Canyon. You stand with your eye to a telescope, the Hubble telescope pictures or whatever. You stand there and you find your soul drawn out of yourself, and for a brief moment you are free from self-consciousness and self-absorption, and it is the most full, satisfying, deep, wonderful moment, and it will be forever if God is the universe and God is the Grand Canyon and God is the ocean. That's why you were made. God would be unloving if He did not magnify Himself in your presence over and over and over. If He did not command you to praise me, praise me, praise me, He would not love you. If He said, I praise you, I praise you, I praise you, He would satisfy that little teeny ego of yours and you would perish. And your soul would shrink up like a peach at the back of the refrigerator. You know that's not what you're made for. You're made to know something vastly greater, namely God. And so He must constantly tell you that. He must constantly lift up Himself, lift up His Son and say, make much of my Son, and it will satisfy your soul. So this fourth point is that the reason this matters to me is I wouldn't know what love is if I didn't tell you that God was radically God-centered, and that this idea that Paul says the unwasted life is the life lived for the glory of Christ is not his idea, it's God's idea, and therefore God is exalting His Son. If I didn't tell you that, I wouldn't be able to communicate what love is. Love is God spending Himself at the cost of His Son's life to free you to enjoy making much of Him forever. That's what love is.